excited. We are live. I'm so excited. Welcome to the event. We are back from our rest as resistance and we are heading forward full force into our new September series, which is focused on communal conversations that really look at this idea of co-creating. So for this episode, we're going to look at the introduction and discuss the introduction of this idea of co-creating as it relates to the book Plenty Good Room by Dr. Andrew Wilkes. So I'm super excited about this one for quite a few reasons. I won't say one, but for a few reasons. One, this book really delves into the nature of the event from an economic standpoint, because one doesn't just talk about economics, although the subtitle talks about an economy of enough for all. What it really does is takes this idea of Black Christian socialism, breaks it down from a cultural standpoint, from a political, from a spiritual. So just like the event has many different aspects of it, we seek to provide holistic support. We seek to create safe spaces. One of the things I really love about this book, and I'm actually a facilitator for a circle reading for anyone who's interested in reading, I can give you more information. But it really looks at politics, economics, but it also gives you the spiritual standpoint, faith tradition, cultural. So it brings in all those different perspectives and really talks about what challenging the norm looks like. It talks about what stepping outside of and giving a counter vision to our political landscape, especially as it deals with economics as it stands. And it really goes back to, because it's not a new idea, and he talks about it in the book, but it really goes back to even when we celebrate things like Kwanzaa, even when we celebrate African traditions, community, cooperative economics, everyone getting a piece of a pie, equity, not just, you get what you get and I get what I get, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, but it's really like, how can we create equity across the board, no matter what your zip code is, no matter what your faith tradition may be, no matter what neighborhood you may be from, no matter what that looks like. How do we create space so that so that people don't have to struggle to bury their loved ones, so that people don't have to sell their homes and do all these things so their children can go to college? What would society look like if we took this, and I know this can be a buzzword sometimes, this more socialist approach to create equity versus where we are now, where there's this big disparity between the rich and the poor, or there's this big disparity between the 1%, right, which have 99% of the wealth, versus the other 99% of people who, even us collectively, can't touch the top 1% as far as we speak about that economically. So I'm excited about that. I know I probably just said a mouthful, but one of the big things that we talk about with the event, again, we talk about spirituality, we talk about holistic care, we talk about taking care of yourself, and a big part of that really does have to do with where you are economically. So as much as we speak about us being human, part of that is us being able to provide ourselves, the people we love, the people that we're responsible for, with basic needs, right? And the other part of that is just if we want to be honest, is living a life that you can enjoy. And it's hard to enjoy life when you're worried about how you're going to pay your bills, when minimum wage is $7.25, and that can't afford like a 1-bedroom home in almost any state in the United States. It's hard to really focus on quality of life when you're trying to survive day to day, or you're trying to figure out how you're going to make it to the next month. The book also talks about, many families are one injury, one emergency away from losing it all. So one of the things we really want to talk about is, since this is the case, not if it's the case, but since that is the case, how can we co-create and be able to provide better equity and build communities with better equity, and have our voices not just from the big wigs, but how do the people who are keeping the economy going, right? The custodians, the bus drivers, the people working in offices, not just the CEOs. How do we put our voices into spaces so that we're able to contribute to all these big decisions that are being made on our behalf, right? Especially, right? And I know that money can be a sticky subject. I also know that politics can be a sticky subject. So that's why I want to talk about it, because for many of us, we have these conversations in pockets. For many of us, we have these conversations, with our family, with different people. We have it after the meeting, before the meeting, in the parking lot. So I want to bring the conversation here to say, look, we know that it's not just about people struggling. Let me be clear. But what we do know is that there is a big disparity between the have and the have-nots. We also know that there are things that are happening around us. We have a big political election coming up. And I will argue that midterms and other things, but that's not the conversation tonight, are very important as well. But one of the big things we definitely want to be able to focus on is, and I forgot to go live on Instagram. I'm about to do that right now. One of the big things I really want to focus on is creating, right? Because that's what we do with the event. We create spaces, we create safe spaces, creating spaces where people can see what equity looks like in the democracy that we live in, as well as start creating space where we can talk about what that looks like and how we can collaborate to bring all that together. So y'all know I always do like this long introduction, so you know what's going on. But welcome to the event. If this is your first time in, come on into the room. If you are on Instagram, I apologize for the delay. I forgot to click go live on Instagram, but welcome. Come on in. We are talking about co-creating as it relates to economics. We're talking about co-creating, and not just money, but looking at it from an equity standpoint, as well as how we collaborate, like our ancestors did, like those that came before us did, to create this space where nobody is lacking and everyone has the ability to get what they need, get what they want, and really live the life that they deserve versus struggling day to day. So with all that being said, come on in, welcome in. Let's talk about co-creating, what that looks like, what it means for our economy to kind of be for all. And by all, that literally means everyone is welcome to have a seat at the table or join in the conversation. Everyone's voice is heard, as well as everyone is considered, despite what their background may be, despite what their zip code may be, despite what their history may be, as far as where they are from a social standpoint. So the first thing, it's always a question, right? The first thing that I want to hear from you guys as you look at and think about what co-creating means. When you hear the word co-creating, we're co-creating spaces. We are coming together. When you hear co-creating, what do you think of? What comes to mind? Are there any words or synonyms or ideas that you're like, okay, this is what, when I hear co-creating or co-creation, this is what I think of. You can drop that in the comments. If you're on Instagram, you can drop it on the comments, as well as there may be a box there where you can drop in like questions if you don't want to say it aloud to the group. While you're doing that, there is a a little section of the book that I want to read. It's just a short clip. I'm not gonna read a book to y'all, I promise. But one of the, I guess, excerpts, it talks about building a democracy where working people have a governing say at the workplace. So workplace, where you're employed, at the ballot box, right? Voting, exercising your civic duties and your rights in society. So that's day to day, the people that you come in contact with, both locally, state level, federally. Society makes up all of that. Within mass media, and it talks about that requires having a conversation about money, finance, and wealth that's different than the conversation that's being had now. So I think the conversation, and y'all tell me, the conversation that's often being had now are big corporations, people who have the I guess for lack of better words, the gavel in hand or the pen with the ink to sign things off. When what I guess ideally our conversation can look like is working class, blue collar, white collar, all of those voices coming together to say, this is what's needed in communities. This is what's needed to help push people forward. And this is what's needed to kind of level the playing field versus you're 100 yards in front of me and I don't even have on the right equipment. You're talking about getting to where you are. I don't even have the right equipment to get further than where I am, and I'm already starting behind the finish line, right? So that's one of the things. So when I think of co-creating, as you're thinking, and again, I would love for you to drop in the comments, co-creation to me looks like collaboration. So that's against that's across faith traditions, that's across zip codes, that's across demographic lines as it relates to ethnicity, as it relates to your race, as it relates to cultural background. Co-collaboration involves many voices that are from different perspectives, right? Because I can't really collaborate with someone if we have the exact same voice, right? So my collaboration when I'm trying to create equity, it's not me getting somebody who thinks just like me and would say the same thing that I said and that would say yes to everything that I say. Me creating collaboration or us opening a space for co-creating means that there may be opposing views or perspectives. There may be perspectives that are just totally different. It doesn't mean opposing. It just means that me as a Black woman that lives in Virginia has a totally different perspective than a Black man that lives in Connecticut, than a Hispanic woman that lives in Texas, than a white woman that lives in Utah, right? We can co-create from different perspectives, from different viewpoints, from different lived experiences, right? And we can respect each other from that standpoint of knowing that we're different, but that doesn't stop us from co-creating if we're open to hearing one another and not just responding, right? As well as if we are open to what equity looks like. Hey, Shop Job Thrifts. So I want to hear from y'all. So one, what do you think of when you hear collaboration? And then two, I guess the second part of that is you look around, like as you look around your community, as you look around, like the people that you know, the people that you collaborate with or see opportunities to collaborate with people. What do you think some of the barriers are to that? So what do you think some of the barriers are to co-creating? And by that, I mean, for example, I know as we talk about, again, just mentioning politics, I know it can get sticky, but that's why we're here to create the space to be able to do it. I think when we talk about, we've had one Black president, we have a Black woman, a Black and Asian woman running for the presidential election. And I think even with Barack, if we go back to like Barack Obama, even if we go back to like Shirley Chisholm and, even further back, we can go back and back and back. But the point that I'm making is as we look at these things, a lot of times people seeing one group of people get equity often makes them feel like their freedom and their rights are being violated or will be diminished if this person gets something. And I don't really understand that. Y'all tell me. I hope I'm explaining it how I understand it. Hey, Dre. But I often see this pushback from groups who may have a certain level of privilege or a certain level of power or a certain level of control when there's another group who may get something or may be receiving better access to equity or resources. So now, because I'm getting more, women are getting full wages or better wages, now there's this group of men that's threatened by it. I don't really understand it. If somebody want to break it down or, try to give another perspective, I invite that and I would love to hear from you. But that's something that's always kind of like left me kind of like, I don't know if confused is the word, or that's something that I haven't really been able to understand. If we all have equity, why do you feel like your freedom is being threatened by me getting something that I just deserve simply as a human right? Right. So I give you some time to chew on that. And maybe you have a different perspective, or you have another perspective to add into that conversation. Hey, Miss Walker. Ms. Walker said collaboration on your level. Absolutely. And I think where collaboration really starts is in the spaces that we're already in. So she talked about collaboration on your level. So I think one of the things we can start collaborating with people is in groups that we already meet with, right? And asking and opening the space for conversation beyond what we're used to. I think we talked about this a little bit when we talked about Afrofuturism, where we talked about seeing ourselves in spaces where society often tells us we don't belong. So seeing people that look like you in positions that they wouldn't normally be in, right? Seeing a woman of color, a person of color running for president, right? Seeing a woman CEO, seeing people who have been denied or ostracized or oppressed or suppressed, now making these feats and overcoming these obstacles often are things that people think are unattainable. But when we start having those conversations just on a very local level, we start opening it up for possibilities for us to think beyond where we are now, right? So that's one of the things when I think about co-creating, it creates the space for collaboration on your level that now widens your scope, right? So you start at the beauty salon, or you start in a grocery store, you start at the Bible study, you start on a job, like on your lunch break, just having a conversation with your coworker. And it's like, you know what? Things don't have to, like, who said things have to be this way? Right? If we come together, we can create equity holistically. Just because somebody, like, you look at Shirley Chisholm, you look at people like Oprah, you look at Michael Jordan, you look at Steve Jobs, like, it's people across demographic lines. But somebody broke the mold to say, hey, we can do this. We can create a cordless phone. We can create holograms. We can create a car that doesn't need gas. We can create a vehicle that flies, right? And while we're talking more human rights and civil rights, it is something that somebody thought of, and they collaborated with other disciplines or other demographics to make it happen. But it took more than just people who thought like them and looked like them for them to have that collaboration that went beyond where they were. So my next question for y'all, as we kind of chew on co-creating, as we chew on collaboration, as we chew on the possibilities of what things could be, right? And I know this conversation is going to stretch us. So part of me is like, we may get some more comments than we had coming in. Part of me is like, if we don't, I hope that means my prayer and my hope is that that means that you're chewing on the information, you're thinking about it, you're processing it, and right now you're taking it in. So you don't have as much to say because of that. Because I'm still processing. Be honest, I'm reading the book, but I'm still processing some things and thinking about some things, going back historically as well as looking forward of what I know versus what I believe can be possible. And sometimes there can be a disconnect, and we have to like build a bridge to get there. But we do that together. So part of the introduction of the book, and again, we're looking at Plenty Good Room. And again, to join this conversation, you didn't have to read the book. I am leading a reading circle for this book. So if you would like to join that, we'll start that on Saturday, and we'll do the introduction in chapter 1. But tonight, we're just talking about some of the concepts from the book and what that looks like from our perspective on a local level. So one of the things that the author talks about is that this book, this writing, what he's put together is part prayer and it's part call to action. So what does it mean? Part of that is kind of what I just talked about, building that bridge. Part of it is, this is something I'm hoping for. This is something that I believe can happen. This is something that I've been praying towards. This is something that I have faith in. But the other part of that is not just me having the spiritual aspect, right? We talk about holistic things all the time. It's not just the spiritual aspect of it, but it's also the action behind it. So it's the praxis of it, where it is, I'm praying for this, I'm believing this. I really think this is something that can happen despite what's happening around me, despite what I've known all my life, or, but just despite what I've seen, what I've experienced. But it's also a call to action for people to come together to make the effort to co-create. So some of the things that he says that we need, and y'all tell me your thoughts as well. Some of the things he says that we need to really co-create in this space is you need moral outrage. And I love that. Moral outrage. Like you need to get so upset, right? Outrage is like beyond mad, beyond upset, beyond disappointed. Outrage is like, oh no, once people get outraged, they're ready to do something about it, right? So moral outrage, vivid faith, right? You need to be able to see it, smell it, know that it's going to happen, believe for it, and collaborative problem solving. So again, one of the things we do at the event is always going to be holistic approach. So we don't want to just talk about it. We want to be about it, right? We want to do it. We want to be practitioners, and we want to really do what we say, and mean what we say, and also do it and not just talk about it. So we have these great conversations. We have these meetups in different cities. We have these pocket conversations that I have with people in the DM or on the phone or on the video call. But one of the things that I love about our community is that many of us, all of us, are also doers in our local communities, on military bases, at job sites, in the marketplace. It's not just I'm upset about this. It's also I'm upset about this. I don't like this. I don't agree with this. And here's what I'm doing about it. Right. So as we talk about this disparity that is going on between have and have nots is one to say it, but the top 1% and everyone else. One of the things we start looking at, and again, this is not a question we necessarily have to answer tonight, is how do we come together to help solve the problem? How do we start chipping away? And let's say it doesn't happen in our lifetime, right? How do we start building a foundation, making strides so those who come behind us can continue to keep the ball rolling, right? So outrage, faith, and collaborative problem solving. Like there's a excuse me, there's a place for every emotion, right? I don't know if y'all seen what's the movie? Chris, what's the movie we watch with the yes. I don't thank you. I don't know if y'all that's collaboration, right? I don't know if y'all seen Inside Out or Inside Out 2, but you need fear, you need anxiety, you need sadness, you need all these things. So for some people it's like outrage or anger, yeah, because that's what put fire under people to keep them moving and to keep them going and to say, okay, no, something has to change. Like I don't want to keep seeing violence in my community. I don't want to keep seeing people die and they gotta use GoFundMe to pay for the funeral. I don't want to keep seeing people die prematurely because they're caught up in a certain lifestyle. I don't want to keep seeing these things. So some kind of outrage, some kind of anger, something has to push you towards happen to collaborate to now say, okay, we're going to do something about this. We're going to cause some change. So all of those emotions are needed sometimes to really get something up under us so that we can go. We can move forward. And y'all let me know what you're thinking. So as you're chewing on this, as you're thinking about this, what are your thoughts right now? What are you thinking about as you look around your community, as you think about what you're going through, what you've seen, what you've experienced? What are you thinking? What are some things that you would point out in your community or in the spaces that you serve in, or just from your personal experience, like as it relates to economics, as it relates to equity across the board, as it relates to leveling the playing field, right? We talked about not using GoFundMe. We talked about, people dying due to circumstances when maybe, someone could have or something could have been different had they had access to better resources. We've talked about all these things, people seeing themselves beyond where they are. Or knowing there are other possibilities outside of, the four walls of church ministry or outside of the 5-mile radius where you live. So as you chew on that, I want to kind of, because y'all know me, I'll keep going and going and going. But I really want us to consider a lot of these things, as well as maybe tonight is like more of like a thinking night. I've been trying to figure out what tonight is, right? Don't get me wrong, I have a plan, right? But I've been trying to think of, is tonight a let's think night and let's process, and then we come back together and we talk, we're reflective when we talk. Is tonight a night of conversation, or is tonight a night of let's just think about what's going on around us, who's being affected by it, and then what are some possibilities? And even if we don't come up with the possibilities yet, it's okay. After I kind of chew on this part, then I can think of possibilities to move forward. Right. And I think that is our bridge between our hope or what we want, what we believe for, even those things that seem like they're impossible. Because even if we go, let's say, to our grandparents or to our great grandparents, or for some of us, our parents, many of them never thought they would see a Black person in the White House, right? But because of collaboration, because of collectives, right? Because of boots on the ground, the hope, right? I think that was like their slogan, right? The hope and the action put together, right? Built the bridge so that we could have a Black president, right? The hope and the action has done so many things. Help us get, as Black women, rights to vote, men and women rights to vote. The hope and the action pushed us through the civil rights movement, right? It wasn't just politicians. It was like Martin Luther King and a lot of the people who worked around him. They were like preachers. They were religious leaders who had a hope and a prayer, but they also had action. And I think for some of us, we often have one or the other, and often we need both. So even if I'm collaborating with people, they may not have the prayer part. Like one of y'all might have to hold the prayer part down, but there's somebody that's like, okay, I know the action part that we need to bring to it, right? So it doesn't necessarily even have to be one person that's doing it, but you see people forming alliances, and you see people forming collectives of different types of people, and that's what we need. And as leaders, many of us have to be more open to people who do not look, dress, think, operate, move like we do, because maybe they're part of a different religion, or maybe they're part of a different cultural background, maybe they have some different beliefs. However, when our prayer and our action come together, we really do need that diversity. We really do need that collaborative spirit to make things happen, right? There were all types of people who were part of major movements. It wasn't just Black people. It wasn't just Muslim people. It wasn't just, like people from the South or people from the North. There were collaborative efforts. It wasn't even just believers, right? For even religious movements, it was different types of people who were willing to come together to co-create this thing, because equity and moving forward was the goal. Right. And then the next thing is, what do we need? Right. And we kind of talked about that. We need the outrage. We need the faith. We need the problem solving. And the book also talks about this idea of Black social Christianity. So that's sound real long, but I promise you it's not. So it talks about agency at work, at home, enjoying things necessary for a fulfilling life. So one of the ways that it's described by one theologian is institutionalized loving kindness. It's prioritizing. So it's prioritizing service. It's a tradition of looking out for others in this paradigm of religion, politics, and economics. It is, I'm not just looking out for me, I'm looking out for social, right? I'm looking out for us. And I want us to do well versus me to do well. It's the embodying, right? No matter what community you're part of, no matter if, you're going to private school and you're paying $100,000 a year, or if you in a VOTEC type style program, or you're not going to school at all and you're figuring things out. It's all of those brains coming together to say, you know what, this is something that we have to do to fight oppression, right? And times have changed maybe, but also things have definitely stayed the same in a lot of areas. So it's this idea that you can have this holistic approach to it. One other idea that's expressed, excuse me, is economics is often, this is a quote that I pulled that I was like, this is good, right? And I would love for you to share in the comments where you might see this in your neighborhood, or where you may have seen this just period in any country, in any space, state, city, area, right? Economics is often politics in disguise. So when you look around your city, when you look around your neighborhood, and this is something I studied in undergrad as well, it talked about access to green spaces, which is a portion of this. It's not the whole thing. But one of the things that we really, um, as I was studying, that we're really focused on was um, neighborhoods of color, whether it was Black people, whether it was Hispanic people, whether it was Latinx, whether it was whatever minority is in that space, it was those neighborhoods access to green space. So one of them was like Chester, Pennsylvania. One area was Warrenton, North Carolina, where they were literally in the Black and poor neighborhoods using them as landfills, dumping old medical supplies and hazardous waste, right? But if you go a county over into a more or less melanated county, right, that would never happen. It's green plush land. The air quality is good. Like all these things happen. So economics is often politics in the side. So where malls are built, where landfills are, where access to bike lanes, like even things as simple as where the nearest hospital is, that is all political, right? And often where you find people who may have a higher income, right? Or you find a higher well-off area, there'll be access to grocery stores and healthy foods and hospitals and bike lanes and green spaces and all these things. You could just name it down the line, right? But if you go to a neighborhood that has more disparity, where maybe the average income is $15,000-$20,000, there it's a food desert, right? There's no access to any kind of by foot or by bike, any kind of grocery store. There are very few green spaces, and if there is a park, it's littered and nobody's taking care of it in the last like 15-20 years, right? You can see the disparity based on whatever the zip code is, what kind of tax money, like all these different, you can go down the list of, okay, this is a more affluent neighborhood, that's why they have access to this, versus this is a more this neighborhood is dealing with more disparity, which means that economically and politically decisions are going to be made in a different way. So let somebody come into this affluent neighborhood and say, and this is an example in this book, White Spaces, Black Faces. Let somebody come into an affluent neighborhood where, let's say, the ratio or the percentage of minority people is less than 10%. Let somebody say that they're going to build a landfill. It's not happening, right? But you can ride through other neighborhoods and a landfill pops up and everybody's like, well, what happened? It was a political decision based on economics. Like, it's the same thing, just in disguise. And decisions are being made often around us when we really should be at the table, helping to make those decisions, being a part of the conversation. Because at the end of the day, the people working those landfills, often the people driving those trucks, the people, doing security in different spaces, are the people who live in the space that's being affected by it. Right? So y'all tell me what you're thinking, what you're feeling as you're processing, or tell me what may not be connecting and where you're kind of like, I don't know about that, right? The last thing is being clear that there are both, when we talk about socialism, when we talk about equity, when we talk about bringing more voices into the conversation that may not be the affluent or the richest or the wealthiest, however, they should be part of the conversation. Everyone deserves to have a fulfilling life. We talk about there are both barriers. So there's some things that we have to overcome. There's some things that's going to try to stop us from doing it. There's some things that are going to present themselves as opposition that already have, right? But there are also some bright spots, right? There's areas for opportunity. There's areas for us to grow. There's areas for us to collaborate and come together with people who we may not even talk to on a regular basis, or people who have resources that once we come together, we can make strides and make great impact. So that's one of the things that he talks about in the book as well. Barriers, right? Things that may stop it, that may halt it, that may slow us down. But there are also bright spots of, oh, but this, right? And I think many of the bright spots, we can again look back in history at how religious leaders and politicians often came together to push things forward. We can look at bright spots like how people who were deemed the minority became the majority, banded together, collaborated, co-created to make change, right? For example, again, civil rights, voting rights, women's rights. If we look at things and laws that were overturned and changed, often it was because even though some group was deemed a minority, they came together across ages, across again faith backgrounds, across economic lines, across all these different ethnicities and cultures, and say, okay, we have to do something to change what's going on. So knowing in advance, right? Okay, there are going to be some barriers, so we need to plan ahead for that. But also the bright spots are what help keep us going, looking back at what has happened, but also looking forward at what's possible and not getting boxed into what we just see right now. Right. And the last thing, and this kind of is I guess like a merger, right? This is me now taking two things that I saw and co-creating, collaborating those two things. So I was able to attend the Black Humanist conference, the inaugural conference. It was virtual this year. And one of the things that was said was talk about Black humanism and like society and embodiment. One of the quotes that I pulled from that, and I'm gonna use this with something I don't know yet, but I'm working on it. It's one of the presenters said, if there is more than one reality, right? And we often talk about these different realities that Black people live in, white people live in, Asian people may live in, wealthy people live in versus people that live in poverty, that people who may be more spiritual versus people who are less or are different, operate spiritually in a different way, is that we often live in these different realities, right? So what's true for me may not necessarily be true for you because of a myriad of reasons, right? But there's more than one way to do it. And in this context, he was speaking about love country and how there is more than one reality, right? Sometimes we can create these realities, whether we do it through whether we do it through movies or creative ways or literally creating spaces, right? Where this is reality in this space. Where one of the arguments was, okay, well, if there's more than one reality, there's more than one way to embody it. So for me, I'm visual. That means that if in reality for you, it's only possible for a certain type of person to have a certain thing, right? And I use politics because that's the closest thing, that's the biggest thing, one of the biggest things. I won't say the biggest thing, one of the biggest things we have going on right now, right? So reality may be because before Barack Obama, somebody's reality was only person that can be president is someone who's 35 plus, white male, right? But we saw a different reality with 2008, where reality is now a different embodiment of what that looks like. So we have this Black president. This is reality now. And this is a different embodiment of something that existed for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? So more than one reality. So different things can be true at different times, and even at the same time, multiple things can be true. And then there's more than one embodiment. So for you, this is what a CEO looks like, right? And then here comes like the lip bar. Here comes like Mael. Here comes all these amazing women, right? Here comes Oprah with like the own network, right? Only people who look like this and do this can have their own network. And then here come Oprah Winfrey with her own network, right? Because that is reality. What she imagined, what she prayed for, whatever her process may have been, was okay, that's reality. But here's another reality, right? Where it is, I know this is what exists, but I also know what's possible, and I can make that reality and I can embody it, right? So whether it's me, whether it's my daughter, whether it is someone else, right? Even thinking about Shirley Chisholm, right? I'm gonna forever be a Shirley Chisholm stan. I don't care what nobody say. I don't care what nobody got to do with it, right? It is. I know the reality of it. She knew she wasn't gonna win the presidential ticket, However, she embodied what she needed to be to start clearing a lane for somebody to come behind her to make this new reality happen. So in reality, I'm aware that even the people who should be with me are against me. I'm aware that I probably won't win this seat or this ticket. I'm aware that, I'm aware of these things, right? But I can embody something so that I open a lane, I open a door for somebody else to be able to walk through it later, right? So it's reality, but there's more. There's always more than one reality. There's always other possibilities. If not, we would still be in a totally different predicament, many of us, if we didn't imagine something different than where we are, right? Like, I'm on this job right now, but I can imagine and embody being something else, right? And being in a different space. I'm in school right now, but my reality is I'll have that degree, right? And I can embody what that will be and how that will be, right? So situations are often temporary, even if they've happened for decades, right? Presidents, even if they happen for decades and decades, that's why we're still seeing to this day the first woman, the first minority, the first, whatever the case may be, the youngest ever, whatever, right? Because somebody knew that this is reality right now, but there's more than one possibility for what reality can be. And I'm also able to embody that, even if I don't fit the mold of what has already come before me. So that is what I am excited about as we talk about co-creating. It's the possibilities of what can happen. Is equity from a collaborative standpoint. It is equity no matter what backgrounds people come from. It is equity even if we don't always agree. It's equity even if we don't have the same anything at all. It's equity when it doesn't make sense, right? So it's equity to create these realities that for some of us, for some of our ancestors, for some of us, we can only imagine, but we're going to help prep other people to get to it. And it's also open the door so that we're not stuck in, okay, well, this is what's happening now. Well, what's now is temporary. So we can create what our future can be, right? So I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. Again, if you would like to join as part of the reading circle, this is the book, and I'll post it on my story as well. It's called Plenty Good Room, and it's by Dr. Andrew Wilkes. And how I got connected to him when I actually was at Princeton doing a fellowship. He and his wife were my cohort leaders, and they were great. They were amazing. So when he posted about leading circles to kind of walk through this book and look at what the possibilities could be from this viewpoint, I was like, oh yeah, I got to do that. Right. So I'm super excited. We have a few people already join. Again, we haven't started yet. It starts Saturday. So we haven't started the official talks, but it starts Saturday. And this book is available pretty much anywhere you can find hard copy books, as well as on things like Kindle, digital books. And I can send you more information if you would like it. But Saturday, we'll be going over the introduction and the first chapter, and we'll be looking at our roots, interrogating our origins, so where all this comes from, and also kind of partially what our conversation was tonight of just opening the door and defining what this looks like and what it can look like. So it's kind of like an open door to possibility, to fighting against capitalism from the sense of this is how things are and this is how things are going to be. Because just like that last quote, we can embody something different. So I'm super excited about that. I cannot wait to talk to you guys again. Let's chew on it. Let's come back. Let's talk on the side. You can join us in the vestibule afterwards. You can join us Saturday online or in person. We'll be talking about, again, our origins, what that looks like, as well as discussing a little bit deeper Black social Christianity, as well as socialism. Again, not in this very boxed understanding of it, but what it kind of looks like. And again, it's not for people who agree with it. It's for people who want to talk more about it, who can agree with it, who are intrigued about it, who are interested in learning more, as well as anyone who just enjoys great conversation and wants to talk more about what it looks like. Is there enough for all? Like, does that even exist? Can it exist? Is that a true possibility? So we welcome all perspectives, and I look forward to chatting with you a little bit more soon. I can't wait, but thank you for joining. Can y'all believe this is episode 23? So I'm super excited about that, but I look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to sharing more space with you, and we will be back next week, Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, to chat a little bit more about collaboration, co-creating, and what equity looks like across the board. Cannot wait for next week to join you. And again, if you want to join us in the event vestibule, you are always welcome in there to talk about anything that you want. But I will see you next week.